In the second book of the Bible, Exodus, an Israelite was raised under the Egyptians, while the others faced persecution and slavery under their ranks. As he grew into adulthood, under the guidance of Yahweh, he would help free the Israelites, who would later be known as the Hebrews, better known as the Jews, from slavery, with the task of delivering them to a land away from their persecutors. This particular Israelite would be known as Moses, who brought forth the Ten Commandments before them, marking a pivotal moment in the Abrahamic faiths and solidifying the story as one of epic proportions. The epic is an outdated genre with stories like the Iliad and the Odyssey, the Song of Roland and Die Nibelungenlied, telling the feats of heroes overcoming great odds, solidifying them as more than just a man, but a legend. 4A Games' Metro is a trilogy of post-apocalyptic survival horror FPSs adapted from the novels of Dmitry Glukovsky, telling the story of Artyom as he crawls through the destroyed city of Moscow in a constant fight for survival. But as the games went on, his deeds would eventually elevate him to more than just a survivor or a soldier, but a hero, and this essay will cover how the games are a retelling of the story of Moses, with Artyom as a pseudo-biblical figure. To get things started, the epic is a long outdated genre stemming back to ancient societies like Greece that tells grandiose journeys of heroes who solidify themselves into legend by enduring a long and arduous journey, facing struggle after struggle before finally getting to their ultimate goal. These tropes would eventually be watered down to the action and adventure genre, which, while they can still be grandiose, act as a shell of what was once the epic genre. For the longest time, many stories started out as the epic poem, written through the oral tradition. These stories would often be without an author as well, making them the OG campfire stories essentially. A good example would be the Song of Roland, based on the witnesses of the Frankish leader known as Roland in the Battle of Roncesvalles. It wouldn't be written down till centuries later. However, the way that the witnesses of Roland told the story elevated him in a way that his existence was of a mythical status, leaving behind a legacy for him to be remembered, which is another important aspect of an epic story. Today, the epic genre can still seep through the cracks of modern media with stories like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, telling the story of the Joestar family and their never-ending fight against evil that it literally transcends time and space. Naruto, telling the story of the aspiring titular ninja, trying to prove himself worthy of gaining the title of Hokage. The Lord of the Rings, showcasing the tale of Frodo Baggins as he and his fellowship travel to Mount Doom to destroy the Ring of Power, and of course today's main topic, Metro. This genre also laid forth the foundation of the hero's journey storyline, which often changes the protagonist, that they often end differently than what they originally started. To best explain this is to retell the story of Metro through this particular criteria, and to make things simpler, this will follow the narrative of the good ending of Metro Exodus, as the bad ending of 2033 and the good ending of Last Light are canonical. It is 2013, and an undisclosed conflict led to Moscow launching nukes at their own people, throwing them into the metro to live out the rest of their lives as the surface is then rendered uninhabitable, not only due to the radiation of the nukes, but also the rise of mutants that would turn the once civilized society of Moscow into a literal concrete jungle. Underground, humanity survives in claustrophobic and filthy conditions, but as they endure the apocalypse, so too did the problems of the old world, such as the Reds, aka the Communists of the Soviet Union, and the Fourth Reich, destroying anything that is suspected to not be completely human. In a different area of the metro is a young man named Artyom. He was just a boy when the bombs fell, whose sole memory of the old world was him getting an ice cream from his mother, which he doesn't even remember what she looks like. Fast forward to 2033, Artyom was bestowed the task of its adoptive father's friend, Hunter, to eliminate a race of mutants known as the Dark Ones, a group of mutants assumed to be the next step of human evolution. Seeing this as a threat not just to those around Artyom, nor the Metro, but to humanity, he would then set out on a journey to ultimately kill them off, and after fighting mutants, bandits, fascists, and communists, he finds Colonel Miller of the Spartan Rangers and joins their ranks into capturing a bunker called D6, where he would then use its stored missiles to completely eradicate the Dark Ones, rendering them ashes just as they have destroyed the surface decades before. Now a respected member of the Spartan Rangers, Artyom was informed that a child of the Dark Ones still lives by Khan, a wandering mystic who he met back in the first game. Miller assigns him the task to kill this child to prevent them from ever re-emerging, but Khan sways him, stating that this is his chance for redemption. Along with Miller's daughter, Anna, Artyom goes to kill off the child, but things go awry as he is then captured by the Fourth Reich. Under captivity, he meets a Red named Pavel, who helps him escape, and the two musketeers, as Pavel dubs them, then venture into Red territory. However, Pavel has ulterior motives and betrays Artyom. Not long after, he escapes captivity and for a while travels alone till he reaches Oktyabrskaya. All the while, Pavel searches for the child. When Artyom gets to Oktyabrskaya, he is reunited with Anna, but shortly after encounters Lesnitsky, a former Spartan that defected to the Reds. Eventually, Artyom saves Anna from Lesnitsky, but the two get hospitalized after he releases a chemical agent. While recovering, the two Spartans fall in love, but Artyom leaves early to get back to searching for the child. Eventually, he would find them under Red captivity and crashes their train, forcing the two to team up and make their way towards Polis, a neutral and diplomatic zone on foot. The pair would then confront Pavel one last time and fight a bear before finally arriving there. But this trip is then cut short as the Reds' leader, Moskvin, would reveal that not only is he a scumbag for killing his own brother, but his colonel, Corbett, is planning a siege against D6 while the Spartans were at Polis. Last Light then ends with Artyom and the Spartans defending D6 from the Reds before attempting to blow it up, only for the child along with other Dark Ones to stop him before quelling D6 of the Reds, before leaving to find a new life and allowing D6 to prosper once more. One year later, Artyom is now married to Anna, but is disillusioned by his life in Moscow and the constant fight for survival. One day, he goes rogue and destroys a radio jammer held by the Hansa Party, a neutral and minor faction in the Metro, mentioning life outside of Moscow, and hijacks a train as Anna and other Spartans join him, later dubbing the train
Even better. Oh, come
How
on.
about Aurora, the Roman goddess of dawn, and a cruiser of, you know what?
That's better.
Not bad. I like it.
On the Aurora, Artyom and company travel east across Russia, encountering a cult worshipping a giant fish in the Volga River, escaping cannibals disguised as the world government in Mount Yamantau, freeing slaves in the dried-up Caspian Sea, and facing a turf war between three different tribes and a giant bear in the taiga forest. Midway to the taiga, Anna becomes gravely ill, and Artyom, being the greatest husband ever and Miller being the greatest dad ever, take the ultimate risk by traveling into the radioactive city of Novosibirsk to find a cure. Upon finding it, the two are stricken with a deadly dose of radiation poisoning, taking Miller's life, but through an emergency blood transfusion, Artyom survives as the crew stop at the shores of Lake Baikal. The story ends with Artyom succeeding Miller as the leader of the Spartan Rangers, with plans to return to Moscow to usher the Metro's residents out of darkness into living on the surface once again. Over the course of 3 games, Artyom as a character has undergone great changes similar to that of the classical epic figures, defined by his feat through each respective game. Each entry in the trilogy represents a chapter of Artyom's life that showcase 3 major arcs that culminate in an epic story that can be broken down to the Tunnel Dweller, where Artyom witnesses the world of the Metro and all its inhabitants setting the world for his story to begin, ending with the genocide of the Dark Ones. Last Light picks up right after, that I like to call the Soldier arc, where his mission was fueled with the task of finding the Dark Child, only to switch gears and seek redemption, ending with the Dark Child and their family saving Artyom and D6, making this arc as one of redemption, as well as his prompts for Exodus. In Exodus, which is also the most overt in terms of its biblical themes, Artyom sets out for his final arc that I will call his Odyssey arc, where he breaks out of Russia in search of a new home. These 3 arcs would help solidify Artyom as a hero of his people, as his feats would elevate him to more than just a man, but a hero with a story to be told for generations. One can also call Exodus his Lightbringer arc in reference to Last Light, as he calls the Dark Child the last light in this kingdom of darkness. But one can also interpret this to be Artyom himself taking inspiration from the Dark Child, and becoming the last light by carrying the torch to a place free from the dangers of the Metro. This is then solidified in Exodus, as his journey ends with the final stop at Lake Baikal, showcasing his changes from the darkness of the Metro to the light of the surface. This ending implies a hopeful future where Artyom would be revered as a hero who would be remembered for generations as the one who delivered his people out of darkness. Feats of epic proportion aside, there is a reason that Metro is really an adaptation of the story of Moses. Yes, there are differences between the 2 stories, but arguably it still reflects key moments of Moses' life and twists them into the story of Artyom, and to better break this down is to draw direct comparisons of the 2. Metro and Exodus start with an unnamed mother and Jochebed losing their sons, a Russian born amongst Russians in Artyom and an Israelite born amongst Israelites in Moses, who were thrust into a new world where they would grow up under a step-family in the form of Alex and the pharaoh Seti. The 2 would grow up to a high ranking, with Moses as a prince of Egypt and Artyom becoming a member of the Spartan Rangers, and would commit or witness a great atrocity with the genocide of the Dark Ones and the enslavement of the Jews. This would then prompt a redemption arc after witnessing a supernatural event in the form of Artyom meeting the Dark Child and Moses meeting God in the form of a burning bush. The 2 would take part in a conflict against their oppressors that once had a close and brotherly friend in the form of Pavel and Ramses, marking the oppressors as the Reds and the Egyptians, which the 2 protagonists would confront personally and, much to their despair, ultimately abandon before finally embarking on a journey to find a new home, away from the terror in the form of Lake Baikal and Mount Sinai, which coincidentally are eastward of their original starting points. In Exodus, Artyom also frees some slaves in a desert as well, marking another similarity, and to hammer it home, Exodus, Latin for exit, share the same name for both the game and the book. Speaking of Latin, it is also no coincidence that the name of the train used in Exodus is called the Aurora, which also means Latin for dawn, implying that Artyom wishes to usher a new dawn, or a new age for the people of the Metro, marking the Aurora to be symbolic of Moses' staff as he parts the Red Sea for the Israelites to travel out of western Egypt. This would also mark water as a symbol of travel out of an otherwise inescapable odd, marked again by the Caspian level as a dried up sea that allows passage for Artyom and company, just as did the Red Sea with Moses and the Israelites, as well as how most of the traveling points in Exodus involve water, from the Volga River to the remnants of the Caspian Sea to the taiga forest. The last point to mark down is how the most prominent characters for Moses are simply adapted into the world of Metro, with the aforementioned Alex being Seti and Pavel being Ramses, making the Reds the Egyptians, along with Miller as Jethro, marking the Spartans as the Israelites. This would also make Anna, the wife of Artyom and the daughter of Miller, the same as Zipporah, the wife of Moses and the daughter of Jethro. This would also be followed with Artyom's childhood friends Eugene and Vitaly as Aaron and Miriam, though that's a bit of a long shot, and Artyom's mom as Jochebed. And lastly, and debatably, Khan, acting as the voice of God. Lastly, to hammer home this idea, the Spartans' resident philosopher, Idiot, which may also serve as a reference to The Idiot, aka Prince Lev Nikolaevich Mishkin by Fyodor Dostoevsky, directly calls Artyom Moses at the beginning of the game.
Life is weird, huh? One random event drags another with it, like links in a chain. And you are pulling that chain out of a deep, dark well. The links emerge from the dark water, and what drink is in that bucket that's on the end of the chain? That's a mystery. That's what I often think about when facing a choice. You can't drop the chain either. You always have to drink from that bucket. Well, bottoms up, I suppose. So, how does it feel to be the Moses who yanked on this particular chain?
Because the biggest inspiration to Metro is a book from the Bible, one cannot leave out the question of Christian influence within the series. It may be hard to see it at first. Artyom is incredibly pale in appearance. He lives a violent life, and is rather pessimistic in terms of his worldviews, at one point explicitly stating that he is not religious, and also possesses a rather Nietzschean philosophy.
And we were saved from his wrath. And he apparently decided that fleshing us out wasn't worth the trouble. Then he went about his business, or perhaps died, while we stayed on this used up and discarded earth and continued just going with it.
However, the presence of God is still something that cannot be ignored with the presence of the supernatural. The games feature multiple instances of supernatural phenomena, from apparitions, being transported to otherworldly visions, and the presence of anomalies that seem to spawn out of nowhere. However, a more covert supernatural element is the invisible nature of God, who takes a backseat in Artyom's life by triggering a flicker effect when he commits a morally righteous action, like returning a teddy bear to a little boy, or sparing Pavel, despite his injustices against Artyom. Some safe houses also take the form of churches, which can be interpreted as the house of God protecting its inhabitants, at least most of the time. And if not that, the game also features many areas that feature prominent religious icons such as Jesus and the saints. Debatably, the character of Khan can also imply another covert presence of God for his tendency to appear randomly while also guiding Artyom through the more supernatural side of things, as well as guiding his morality. Also, at one point, he literally puts Artyom in a pseudo-baptism, so if that doesn't scream a prophet-like figure, I don't know what will.
I call it the River of Fate, because it can change your destiny, wash away the silt of the past, and offer the chance for a different future.
Lastly, in classical mystic fashion, he just straight up disappears, only to reappear once in a vision on the Aurora while Artyom stands at death's door, implying that he has a more than natural nature to him. In conclusion, the Metro trilogy adapts one of the Bible's most famous stories into a dark and depressing world that yearns for someone to take the torch and guide his people to salvation in the form of Artyom, who becomes a pseudo-biblical figure under the guidance of an invisible being, which would propel him to commit feat after feat, and whose hopeful dream for freedom would cause his people to see the light of the sun once again, away from the dark and metal doors of the Metro. Amongst his many witnesses, the story of Artyom will be told long after his passing, laying forth a legacy of epic proportions similar to the likes of Odysseus, Frodo Baggins, the Joestar family, and of course Moses. History may change many things, but one thing's for certain is that the people will remember not the tunnel dweller, nor the soldier, nor the dreamer, but simply Artyom, the hero of the Metro.
We found the place I saw in my dream. That hill on the shores of Baikal where Miller took me. A clean place, just like he said. Everything around is clean. We found ourselves a home. A home at the foot of a hill, overlooking a lake. A home where we could raise our children, who will be born not in the damp and dark tunnels, but under blue sky and bright sun.
Ladies and gentlemen, As the ranking officer, I propose a motion to entrust the duty of commanding the order to Artyom. Unanimously approved!
And so that concludes my thesis for the Metro trilogy. This one was a daunting task as I had to cross-reference 3 games, but also the Bible and a movie, plus a bunch of other media to get my point across, but nevertheless was an enjoyable one to make. The Metro trilogy, especially Last Light, are some of my favorite games ever, as they were the first to show me narrative storytelling under an aesthetic that I like, but regardless, under retrospect, made me realize about the depth of what went into creating it. Anyways, for my next essay, I would like to do a character study on Ratonaketon, aka Connor Kenway from Ubisoft's Assassin's Creed 3, in conjunction with Drew Hayden Taylor's Dead White Rider on the Floor, examining whether or not he is a fully fleshed out character or just another depiction of native stereotypes. I should emphasize I myself am not native. However, I plan to consult some of my friends that are native to see their side of things to better understand the effects of stereotyping and societal reaction, amongst my other due research as I would do with my other essays. Other than that, I think I've yapped on for long enough. So, thank you everyone for watching this. And as I always say, ladies, gentlemen, everyone in between, and everyone in New Orleans, my name is Cobra. And y'all have yourselves a beautiful day.